what we're doing now is killing us, right? We're working real hard. We're working real hard to prove to people our value. And a lot of times these are people who will never acknowledge our value because they don't want to see it. They don't want to see it. They don't want to pay for it. They don't want to acknowledge it, right? They're scared of it. I spend all the time proving how good I am, and they spend all the time looking for ways to disprove it, to say, oh, you're not that good.
Hey Journeyers, welcome back to the Journey to Launch podcast. I'm really excited for you to talk to this guest or to hear this guest in our conversation. It is going to be Roshida Dowe. She's the founder of Shida's On the Loose, and she's an expert for would-be adventurers coming out of hiding so they can take control of their dreams and finally plan their sabbatical journey. And she draws on her own experience from taking the plunge and leaving her career. I heard you were once a lawyer, Roshida, and now you are living in Mexico City doing the damn thing, inspiring other women to go out on their own. And, you know, I'm sure men can get some things from this too, but I'm really excited to learn more about your story and for you to educate the journeyers who are listening on how they can also step into a life that's waiting for them. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. So, yay.
Yay. And before we pressed record, I was saying that one of my friends sent me your information about, I think you were profiled on a site about moving to Mexico City and you were just living your dreams. I was like, all right, she sounds like a perfect person who needs to come on this podcast. And then I started to dig a little bit more and saw that you were a lawyer. And I have so many ex-lawyers or people who are lawyers who have been on the show and they've just, you know, they switched careers or they've done something completely different. But I would love to go back to your days as a lawyer and what finally gave you the courage to quit that.
I didn't really decide to leave my job. What happened was the company I was working for went out of business. And when it went out of business, I had about 6 months notice that my job was going away and everybody's job was going away. And in that 6 months, I spent a lot of time thinking about what was next. I spent a lot of time not thinking about what was next because I'd been unhappy in my job and I didn't want to get another job that was very similar to it. And so what I ended up doing was putting it off. And then when I started doing the job search, I realized that I hated all these jobs I was looking at. Like I would go to interview and I'd be like, I don't even want to work with you. Like, what are we talking about? Why am I here? I don't want to do the work you're talking about and I don't want to work with you. And throughout my career, that had been a theme that had come up a lot. I liked the work I did 9 times out of 10, but the people I worked with were usually the problem. And I know a lot of lawyers feel the same way. Clients aren't always the most awesome people. And so the idea of getting another job doing something similar to what I was doing before, something that was making me really unhappy, something that had me going to my therapist every week, like, girl, you won't guess what they did this week. It didn't sit well with me. And I'd always seen people taking long breaks. I'm also a yoga teacher. I became a yoga teacher maybe 8 years ago. And I saw people in my sphere of influence who were taking long breaks. They'd work for 6 months at a coffee shop and then go travel the world for 6 months. And at the time, back then, I was like, how are y'all doing this? What's happening? Like, I don't understand how you can just take 6 months off. Like, is somebody sponsoring this? How is this working that you make enough money in a coffee shop to do this? And then I realized along the way, that was none of my business. Like, I didn't need to worry about how they did it. If I wanted to do it, I needed to figure out how I could do it. And so that was a point that kind of changed things for me. I was talking to my therapist, talking about how it didn't feel responsible to do this. So I know a lot of this will resonate with a lot of people. It felt like this was not the kind of thing that I should be doing. I am a Black woman. I am a lawyer. I have on paper, a great job. I know how hard it was to get here. My peers know how hard it was to get here. My mama knows how hard it was for me to get here. This was a challenge. This was a real challenge to be where I am. And what does it look like to just walk away and take a break? But girl, my mental health. right? Like, um, once I looked, the first thing I did and first thing I recommend anyone considering this to do is to actually look at your finances and figure out if it's possible. Because I told myself, there's no way, there's no way, there's no way. And then I started looking at some of my accounts and I was like, ooh, there's a way. Like, I think I could do this. And then when I realized I could do it and um, I still talk myself out of it. I was still like, it's not responsible. Why don't I work for a year and have a plan and go after my plan? And my therapist, lifesaver, was like, if you don't do this now, you're never gonna do it.
Mm.
Pretty much like you're BSing. Like you're lying to yourself. If you tell yourself that you have a dream, you don't have a job. My lease was up. I'm not in a relationship. I don't have kids. If you like, if all of those things line up for you and you don't do it now, when are you going to do it? Like, and so that was really what it was. I lost my job and I didn't like the other employment options. So I was
How
like, what do I
how
do?
long ago was that?
That was 2018. That was spring. So I found out in 2017 they were going out of business. And in April 27th, 2018 was my last day of working for anyone else.
Okay, wow. So, okay, I have so many questions, but I want to go back because I did read somewhere that you also got laid off in 2009.
Yes.
And when that happened, that's when you started to save more money. So I'd love to kind of go back and talk about what you were doing with your money because as I know lawyers and what they've been through, especially with their student loan debt, even though maybe you were earning a high income, how were you financially managing as a lawyer when you were working? And then I would like for you to talk about that 2009 incident and how it kind of prepared you for your next layoff.
So I started working as a lawyer. I graduated law school and passed the bar in 2006. I started working as a lawyer in fall of 2006. And it was awesome. I mean, the money was coming, it was flowing, it was here. Yay. I bought a really cheap house that I could afford. I was actively trying to work on my finances, but I got hooked up with a financial advisor that was more interested in what she could get from a situation than my overall financial health. Like one of the things she told me early on, and I just didn't know better, was everybody has student loan debt. So there's no point in ever trying to pay it off. Like don't ever try, like do other things with your money. Don't ever try to pay it off. And that could work for some people, but I hate debt. I hate debt being over my head. So that didn't work for me, right? Like, so I was giving her money to invest. She was at one of those large companies that takes a big chunk. So it wasn't even like the performance wasn't even doing very well, but I wasn't paying off debt. But I was still flowing, flowing, flowing. And then in 2009, when I got laid off, it was that was a job that I absolutely hated. It was terrible. Those were awful humans. I don't care if they hear this. I hate y'all. But no, I was doing commercial real estate financing work, and no banks were lending to commercial lenders. And so there was no work. And so I was looking for a job at the same time they were creating their layoff plan and lying to us and saying they weren't going to lay anybody off. At the same time they were doing that, I was looking for jobs, but there were no jobs. No one was hiring. And I I couldn't find anything. So when they laid me off, I was like, okay, bye. But that led to 6 months of unemployment because, like I said, no one was hiring for what I did. 6 months of unemployment. And in that 6 months, I was like, I need to be serious about money because I got a mortgage and I don't have a sponsor. So who's gonna pay this mortgage, right? Like, I can't call my parents and say, can you pay my mortgage? So now it was low. It was when I bought my house. I was in Columbus. I bought a house for $84,000. My mortgage was like
Okay.
100 and something.
So
So
you
it
were
was
in
only,
Ohio?
I was in Ohio. I was in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
So it wasn't a high mortgage, but it was still like, but if you don't pay it, they gonna come get this. Like you can't skip it, right? So I had a paid off car. I had a house that I was trying to pay. And after 6 months, I was like, oh no, when money starts flowing in again, we're gonna have to do this differently, right? Like
Mm.
I need to pay off debt because I don't ever want to feel that stress of having debt and being unemployed because you never know when these jobs, like I said, the last job lied to me, lied to all of us and said we would never lay anybody off. And then like a month later, laid off 20% of their associates. Like,
Wow.
you know?
Yeah.
So I recognized that this was a possibility at any point. You know, you can't rely on these employers. You can't rely on them to have your back. They laid us off and they were like, we will give you, I'd been there for 2 years and they were like, we'll give you 2 weeks severance, but
Mm.
you have to sign something that says we can say whatever we want about you, but you can never say anything bad about us. And I was like, will I sell my soul for that? Like for 2 weeks, like y'all are terrible humans. Will I sell my soul for 2 weeks severance? Nah. So I didn't even get any money on the back end. It wasn't like I was living with this pot of money that would do me
Yeah.
good.
Do you remember how much student loan debt you had at the time?
When I had loans in college and I had loans in law school. I paid for everything with those. I didn't get any other kind of support. And so I would say at the end, the total debt at that time was over $200,000 in student loans.
Wow. Okay. That's it's. I'm saying wow just because that doesn't sound actually that far off from most lawyers that I talk to. But in general, though, it's still a high amount. Like it's more than your mortgage was.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
More than my mortgage was. And you know, student loan debt, the number never goes down. Like the number is
Right. Right. It compounds. Like the interest rate makes it compound. Okay. So 2009, you get laid off. You're blindsided, and you're realizing I need to get better prepared. And so this is when you start becoming better with money.
Yes.
What were you doing? Saving? Did you start paying off the debt faster?
I started paying off my debt faster. I started making multiple mortgage payments a month. I know some people hate that idea. They're like, you should invest instead. But I always tell people you have to do what's right for me. And for me, what was right was getting out of debt and having a debt-free lifestyle. So I made multiple mortgage payments. And then when I paid off my mortgage, I put everything towards my student loans. And then it was like, okay, now this money is mine. Like any money left over after that, once I paid off all of that stuff, which took a while, it probably took me like 8 years. Once I decided that like getting out of debt was my financial priority, it probably took me 8 years to get out of debt.
But that was before you got laid off in 2019.
Yes. Yes.
Which it's crazy because you made that decision in 2009 and you set yourself on this path, and then so when this happens again, you are more financially prepared more than ever because you took the lesson from the last time. Yes. And I just feel like there are people right now who maybe be going through their first lesson and it feels like it's done and what's the point? But this lesson or whatever you're going through now is setting you up so you can make the proper changes so the next time you are going to be so prepared to do what you want to do in life. So I just want to say that. So that's great that you did that. And I know some people, I think what's going to happen is this is going to help a lot of people who can relate to you, like who are maybe single women, no kids. And then I also know there's that side of, well, it's easier because you were a lawyer and you probably had a high income and also you're a single woman. But I'm assuming though that was not without, your journey still was not without sacrifice and having to make hard decisions, right?
Yeah, there were definitely hard decisions. There were definitely times where I was like, especially at that first job, like if I didn't need money, I would never set foot in this building again. There were sacrifices along the way. There were choices I had to make. Everyone has to make a choice with what they do with their money, and I had to make a choice just like everybody else. It's easier on paper when you don't have dependents, but just because you don't have kids doesn't mean you don't have people who depend on you for money, right? Like we can't lose sight of the fact that for a lot of us, especially I am an immigrant. I am the child of immigrants. Like that network is kind of deep. Like if when you start making money, you can be kind of the bank for your family. Fortunately, it wasn't that deep. Like I did have some moments where people would come to me for money, but it wasn't that big of a deal, or it wasn't a regular thing. I'm great with boundaries on that kind of thing.
Good for you.
It wasn't that big of a deal, but it's easy to look at someone and say you had a high salary or you don't have kids, so it's easy. But there are a lot of other things that play into that. A lot of emergencies. I needed a new roof, right? Like that's got to be the price of one kid for a year, right? Like, those are the kind of
maybe
things.
depends. But it's a good point. I just think sometimes we're looking at people's situations, and there are some times where you can say, well, if someone's in a relationship, it could be easier because you have two incomes more than versus one, or you have dependents, that's more of a tax write-off. Like there's all these things that you can either make positive check marks or make it an X that you feel drags you down. I always choose to look at even like the things that other people look at as a negativity or something that slows you down as a motivating factor. But always recognizing that there is a difference. There is more hurdles that people who have more responsibilities, have less income, have to go through in order to achieve some of the things that you've done and what I've done.
Yes.
So let's go forward a little bit, if you don't mind, because I'd love to hear like that moment. So 2019, you're like, all right, I'm not doing this. I'm not going back to work. At this point, where were you financially in terms of debt? How much did you have saved? Because I want to paint the picture of what allowed you then to do what you're doing now.
So it's 2018, and I had no debt. I had tried property investing. So I had bought a house with my mom in Columbus to flip. And I realized I hated property investing. Ooh, child, that was a lot of work. And so I had two houses. When I moved from Columbus back to the Bay Area, I had two houses in Columbus that were completely paid off. And I saw they both closed on the same week, closed them, ready to buy a new place in the Bay Area. And the two houses, the entire sales price, no mortgage, not paying anyone except for, any realtor fees or closing costs. Nothing, there's no money coming out of that, nothing. It's all mine. Could not pay for a down payment in the Bay Area. Like two houses sold in full. I'll never forget that I was like, but I'm
Not even down payment.
not even a down payment. Not even down payments. I was like, I have to save. If I want a down payment, I have to save more money. So I invested the money that I had. I got from my house, my half of the house sale of the investment sale, and my own house. Invested it, and I was like, when the time is right, I'll buy a house. But I got laid off before the time was right, right? And so I had house money. I will never. So we talked about privilege before. I will never deny that that was a privilege, but it was also a privilege that I worked for because I worked to pay off. I made sacrifices to pay off that debt early, right? And so that's why I had house money because I paid off my mortgage super early. So I had house money that I'd been wanting to buy something with, and I was like, but if I'm not, if right, like if I could travel the world for just a portion of this house money, and I talked myself out of it because like, but what about when I want a house? And I need this money, or what about when I run out of money, or what's the next plan? And eventually I was like, you can do this. You can do this. So when I actually left, I had been getting paid double. Let's talk about a gift. When
Yes,
those
yes.
people laid me off, I was one of the last two, we had thousands of employees, and I was one of the last two employees at the company. And so they paid me double my salary for 7 months to keep me around. Now that was a privilege because I had house money and I had double the salary money. And so when it was time for me to go, it was like, oh, I have money saved. I had probably about just under half a million,
Okay.
just under $500,000.
And this was working in Ohio, or were you back in the Bay
I was back
Area?
in the Bay Area at this point.
Back in the Bay Area, so you're probably, I'm assuming, renting
Yeah,
or
I'm renting a place. My lease is up a week after my final work day, and they want to raise my price, so it's real close to $3,000 a month. And I was like, this just don't make no sense, y'all. And I ended up traveling. I left with like a month's notice, and I ended up traveling the world for around $3,000 a month. I have friends who've done it for $1,200 a month, travel anywhere they want to go under $1,200 a month. I didn't do a lot of advanced planning, so I spent around three. But when I compare what I spent in that year to the mental health and clarity that I gained from that year, and compared it to the amount of money I still had, because people are always worried. Like, I help people with this all the time. I talk to people who are like, I have $400,000 saved, and I only want to travel for 6 months. But like, can I do that? And I'm like, yeah, like you can do if you have all this money saved. We can have all these great plans for it, but if you're unhappy in your moment and your life isn't working for you, can you invest in yourself, right? Can you make that investment in yourself, your mental health, your well-being, and do something different than what you're doing now? Because what you're doing for a lot of us Black women specifically, what we're doing now is killing us, right? We're working real hard. we're working real hard to prove to people our value. And a lot of times these are people who will never acknowledge our value because they don't want to see it. Right? That was my problem with the law firm. Like, I am good at what I do. Let me show y'all how good I am at what I do. But they don't want to see it. They don't want to pay for it. They don't want to acknowledge it, right? They're scared of it. And so I spent all the time proving how good I am, and they spent all the time looking for ways to disprove it, to say, oh, you're not that good. Oh, you did this great. The client is happy, but you should have asked for more help, even though you did it, and it's closed, and it's perfect, and the client is happy. You didn't call me on vacation in Hawaii to get help from me to do it. So you're getting a ding on your evaluation. That kind of stuff, where it's like, it doesn't even make
Petty stuff. It's petty.
It's petty
like,
stuff.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
petty. And a lot of us live in that world of nonstop petty stuff. And these people it's never going to get better, right? So like, what do you do for your own mental health, right?
Right. So, okay, dealing with, I can relate in some sense to the microaggressions and just living in that environment where it's just, especially where you just don't feel like you fit in, and that, you know, or you're a token for them, honestly, to like show to clients that we're diverse. Like, look, here's, you know, this Black woman that works with us. But let's go a little bit now to planning and what you did. So you're currently in Mexico City, but you did say that you traveled the world.
Yeah.
And I think just practically for people thinking about this, like they may have some money invested. What were you doing? Like the money that you used to travel the world, was that parked in your savings account? Were you taking money out of retirement accounts to do this? How did you structure kind of this nest egg that you built?
I had a money market account, a non-retirement investment account, and I took the money out of there.
Okay.
So when I was getting paid a lot of money for those last few months of work, I put all the money in there. And so I had money because I wasn't sure what I was going to do, right? Like, do I want to sign a lease in the Bay Area when I don't have a job? No, I don't want to do that, right? That doesn't make any sense. And so I was really never sure what I was going to do. And so when I made the decision to just go and see what happens, I had that money sitting there. I had the house money sitting there, and I had retirement funds sitting there. So there was a lot to draw on, but you don't need everything that I had. And that's the message I want people to have, is like, it's great to talk about money. It's great to have a lot of money. Like, the downsides of a lot of money are very few. Like, I don't see it, right? But you don't need to have all this money to make the choices that I did, right? Like I said, a friend of mine traveled for a full year on $14,000. It's not no money, but it's not, you don't need $500,000 to do that, right? And so recognizing that you have choices and you're not stuck. I felt stuck when I was in these jobs that were like, it's past unhappy. These jobs were making me depressed. When I was in these jobs that were making me depressed, I felt stuck. Like, my only other option is to get another job, right? Like, maybe I'll find a job that I like. Maybe I won't. But there's no way out, because once, especially like we talked about before, you reach this level of success on paper, and it's like, why would you ever leave this? Why?
Yeah.
Why
Because especially if you have a lot of people around you who are looking at it in the traditional sense, and I just heard that you are a child of immigrants, like everyone's looking at you like you made it. So why are you walking away from this to go backwards? Like, to go back to where we came from and not have much and not spend a lot of money? Like, that just seems like you're hustling backwards, when that is not the point. Like, you want the freedom. So how did you decide ultimately on Mexico City, where you are now? Like, talk me through that process of making that choice.
So it's funny. I visited Mexico City twice during my career break, and I think maybe once before that. And on the second time, I was here with a good friend of mine. And we were in our hotel, and then we left to go take a walk. And we were walking around. It was so beautiful. I looked around. I looked up, and I said, why don't I live here? And she looked at me. This is someone who's known me for a very long time, so she could do this. She looked me dead in the eye and said, why don't you? And it was just like this deadpan response of like, tell me, like, why don't you live here? And I was like, wait, I can just move? Because it sounds so like, I know the idea of leaving the US and moving abroad is getting more popular now than it was years ago. But in 2018, when I was planning on leaving, I wasn't seeing people like me taking career breaks. And I wasn't seeing people like me moving abroad when it wasn't for a job, when it was just to like, I want I don't want to live in the US anymore, right? Like I love it. Not even that. I love this city. I love being in this city. I want to live in this city. How do I move? I can just move to another country because I like the city. People do that. I was like, oh wait. And then so that was January 2019, and in May of 2019, when my year of traveling was over, I moved to Mexico City and had some setbacks. I had to end up back in the U.S. for a year when coronavirus was raging, and I had to have surgery. Long story, irrelevant to this, but I got my residency in June of 2021. So I'm a legal resident now. It's a temporary residency, so I have to renew it once a year for 4 years, and I can get permanent residency. But yeah, I legit live here now. This is my home.
Wow. So did you know anyone living there before you got there that you had like this inbuilt network, or you had to create that when you got there?
I created that, but your people are everywhere. You belong everywhere, and your people are everywhere. I moved down here. I reached out. You got to rely on some of these Facebook groups. I reached out in Facebook groups to people. I found people that I liked. One of my closest friends down here, I posted on Instagram that I was going to get some pie, and she was like, I'll go with you. And we, like 3 years later, we're still friends, right?
And you didn't know her then.
I didn't know her.
Right.
She was like, pie, I'll go. And now we're like, we're Mexico City besties.
Yeah.
It's literally like that. You don't have a network, but you can create your own networks. Just like think of it as like kindergarten. Like just like you made friends in kindergarten, like it's that easy to make friends in a new city because other people don't have their built-in networks either, right? It's not like you moved to a city where everyone's established and everyone's lived here for 30 years and no one wants to talk to the new girl. It's not like that. It's like everybody is reasonably new, whether they've been here 7 years or 7 months. Like everyone's like, hey, you're here. They understand what you're going through, like when you're new to a city, no matter what city it is, and they want you to succeed. 99 times out of 100, when I talk to another expat, they want to see all the other expats they come in contact with prosper. We want to see you win, right? Like, if you made this move, we want you to win.
Do you think there's a certain personality trait that allowed you to be able to take this leap by yourself? Because I have friends who, like, I know why I can't do this, like, because I do feel a little tied down, and not in a bad way, but just a responsibility. Like, I have 3 small kids, I have a husband who has his own career, and so for me just to, like, get up and leave, like, that's just it's a bigger conversation. And I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's harder. But I have friends who are single, and they talk about wanting more freedom, but ultimately, like, I don't know that they have the personality or the real desire to do what you did. So I'm wondering if there's something about you, whether like you feel like you're an extrovert, like you don't mind talking to people and making new friends. Like, what is it about you that you feel like you were comfortable enough to like do this on your own?
I'm an introvert, but I'm not scared of anything. Like that's a trait I get from my mama. Like, I'll figure it out. And no matter what happens, I think that's my trait. Is and my career break prepped me for moving really well, because when you're traveling the world for a year, things are going to go wrong. You're going to have to pivot. And so being able to adapt, being able to pivot, that was really key for me. And so, but there are situations where it doesn't feel like you can pivot. Like I talk to people who are in jobs that don't deserve them, right? And it might feel like you can't pivot, but it's there, right? Like it might not look like what you expect it to look like, but the pivot is there, even for you, right? Like it might not look like what we're talking about or what you expect it to look like, but the pivot is there if you look for it. And often, like for me, the pivot was there because I didn't have a choice, right? Like I had to do something. I lost a job. Like I did not have a job. I had to do something. And sometimes that's what it comes down to. Like these friends, maybe they need that moment of like, oh no, I have to do something differently, right? Like I walked into the office today and flipped the desk, right? Like I gotta do something differently, right? It might be just that they need that moment of saying, what I'm doing now isn't working, or I don't want this anymore. And I talk to a lot of women who are in that point of like, I don't want this anymore. It's not what I want. How do I get something new?
Yeah, it's like your big breaking point moment, or your back is against the wall. I know, like, my back was against the wall when I was having my third, and I was like, I am not going back to work after maternity leave. Like, this has to be my deadline, and that was my kind of like, you're going to do this. I don't care what it looks like, but you have to get this done. So I totally totally understand that. Now, in terms of someone now listening and saying, okay, Rashida, I love it. I love what you're saying. Like, I am not happy in my job. I want to take a break. Let's talk about the different ways to think about setting up a break, because
Okay.
some of it, like I talk about financial independence, retire early a lot. That's what I first started out and what I wanted to do, like just quit forever and not ever have to go back to work. And then as I started on the journey, I thought to myself, there can be a more balanced approach where maybe it's not working forever, but it's more now I'm actually doing something I love, so it doesn't matter how long I work. I mean, I can still have the option to retire, but it's not running away from something. How can someone now who has some options in front of them or who wants to create options think about this? Should they stay in a job maybe and think about just the income and saving and investing for a certain amount of time so that they could forever quit? Or should they be looking at it more as, how can I take more breaks within my career so that I can have a more balanced life? Like, how would you approach that, and how should someone approach that?
I think it depends on their goals. So for me and for a lot of the people I talk to, it is for my mental health. I need to make a change in like the next year. Like in the whatever money I got in the next year is the money I need to live with, because I don't have more than a year of this left in me. And for other people, like you said, maybe they just need a 6-month break now, and then another 3 months, another 6-month break. So for people who aren't like on the edge of a mental health crisis or a physical crisis too, because we don't talk about that a lot, but like the stress that we endure at these jobs, it eats into our bodies, right? I know a lot of people who are actually sick until they quit, and they're like, oh, I feel better now. I'm like, yeah, yes, your job was trying to kill you, girl. But for people who don't want to maybe take a long-term break, I always recommend put space between the old job and the new job, right? Like if you're going to start something new, take a month off, take 6 weeks off. So often we hear people quitting one job or getting a new job and giving themselves a weekend in between. And then when the new job doesn't want to approve your vacation time, now you're mad because you haven't had a vacation in like 2.5 years. Yes. Like you need more time for yourself.
That makes sense. And I'm just thinking financially, like how does one prepare for that? Should they hold off? Let's just say they weren't as financially stable as you, so they still had debt and responsibilities that they had to pay for, and now they are about to switch jobs. Like, should they forego? And this, I know this is a more personal question. I have an answer also that I can give once you're done. But should they forego investing and saving so that they can create that space and pay for the thing they want to do for 6 months?
I would say see if you can kind of split it up. So if you have debt, like depends on how you feel about debt, right? Like I didn't like having debt over my head. If you're okay with some debt while you go, like take care of you. For a lot of people, that means healing. That means going and really like looking deeply into what they need. If you are okay with debt, okay, don't like supercharge paying off your debt. Put some money aside for living expenses. But what also tends to happen is a lot of people move to lower cost of living cities and countries, and so their cost of living is already lower. So if they take a break and they're actually like moving somewhere, if their cost of living is lower, if they're doing anything for income, maybe it's not the old job, maybe they're working a part-time job or a remote job or something, or they're building a business or they've built a business. If there's any income coming in, you don't generally need as much income as you did in the US. And so you can work less for probably a higher standard of living and still service the debt the way you were before, right? And so it's thinking about what are the different ways you can look at the money you have and the money you will have in the future to create a plan that works for you. And you're right, it's very, very personal. It's going to depend on what they have. But for someone, let's say someone who can have $1,000 coming in a month, there are a number of cities you could move to right now, and $1,000 a month would be enough to take care of you. And I know people who have children with them who are traveling and living on under $1,000 a month in different cities around the world. And it's like, I know a woman who works I think she works 6 hours a week and it pays for her and her son. Like, right? So she's not retired. She hasn't quit the job, but she works 6 hours a week and it pays
Right,
for her and her son.
right.
Right?
Now, this is why it's also so important to get like a clear sense of where you are financially, like the big picture.
Yeah.
Like, and I think sometimes we look at our finances in silos. Like, we only look at the debt, we only look at maybe how much we have saved. But the full picture will give you a better idea of what is actually happening. And like in my case, like I was fine with pausing investing and saving once I decided to quit my job, and I gave myself while I was pregnant to switch strategies instead of putting all our money into investment accounts. It was like, we got to put money into like a FU account now to help cover expenses while I'm building up the business. Like, that is fine with me because it's worth it. And so there may be some points where you have to make a decision on this is going to be worth for me to pause. And one of the reasons why it was okay for me to pause this is because when I ran the calculations, is that ultimately something called Coast FI, so I'll just quickly define that, meaning we would reach our financial independence goals, or we would be okay in our standard retirement age if we no longer even invested in our retirement accounts, because they had that much in it where they could compound over time for the next 30 years.
Right.
So it wasn't as much as it could be if I kept investing over time, but it was just enough where we wouldn't be on the streets.
Right.
For me, that was enough, and a good enough safety net to take the leap, because I said to myself, then that means we only have to make enough money to pay for our living expenses.
Yes.
And I think if you start thinking like that, and if you are in a job right now and you want to, maybe it's not immediate that you have to leave, but you're thinking, you know what, I want to do what Jamila and Roshida is talking about in the next 3 years, then you can start like looking at your full financial picture and planning ahead and saying, how much would I need while I'm traveling or building up this business, and how much do I already have saved and invested? And if I were to stop investing for a little bit just to take this leap, where does that put me in the next 20, 30 years? Will I still be okay? So there's a lot of stuff to talk through with that, but I just think it's important to think about.
But I find that a lot of people don't want to look at the numbers, right? Like, and it was like that for me, girl. When I was laid off, I was like, I don't need to know how. Like, men, stop talking to me. How do I turn off these notifications? What's going on? Like, it's hard when you think it's going to be bad news. It's really hard to look at the numbers, like the total holistic financial picture.
Yes.
But it's, for most people, I find out it's typically better than they think it is.
Yes.
Like, our brains tell us that, like, you ain't got no money, you ain't got no backup, like, sis, you broke, right? Like, that's what our brains tell you. And then a lot of times you look at numbers and you're like, but I'm not, right? Like, I got a little change here, got a little change there. That debt isn't as bad as I thought it was. Like, the interest rate isn't terrible. Like, it takes facing it to know what you can do. It takes facing the numbers to say, okay, this is what's possible in my life now.
Yes, I love that, and I find that too. People are more afraid. It's like that boogeyman, like in the thing you think is under your bed, but it's like not really there, and it's keeping you stuck more than it needs to. One of the things that I love, I was watching something that you did on your YouTube channel, I think, and you talked about being productive, like the difference between being productive and I think feeling productive, and because I think what's happening for some people when they hear about financial independence, retire early, and not working, like this idea of not working, it turns them off completely, because we've been socialized in this environment, in this capitalistic society, that we should always be working and proving our worth. And so the idea of not doing anything is foreign. Even for me, sometimes if I'm like just not doing anything, I'm like, there's something I should be doing. Like, so talk a little bit about that. I loved how you explained it.
So for a lot of us, like you said, we've been trained that doing something, like, our highest value is what we create. Our highest value is what we produce. I recognized very early in my career that all of my jobs were just making rich people richer, right? And for a lot of us, it's going to be the same thing. Like, at the core of your job, what do? You make rich people richer. Like, I know someone's like, no, I work at a nonprofit and fine. But like, for most of us, we make rich people richer. And so this doesn't work unless we're being told that there's some like nobility in that we have to be productive. Because if you look at your job like that, I'm just making rich people richer, it has significantly less value, right? Like, it means a lot less unless you're one of the rich people, right? And so how do you... We've been sort of tricked into believing that, like, hi, my name's Roshida and I'm a lawyer is important, as opposed to like, hi, my name's Roshida and I just started watching Ozarks 2 days ago and I love it, right? Like, And so who we are, what our jobs are, what our titles are, who we work for, what we produce is seen as important in this society. And that makes it really hard to let go of. To go from, I am a lawyer, I'm a lawyer who works for BMW, right? To I'm I just chill. I'm just traveling. I'm just traveling. It's fine, right? Is hard. And it's harder for some other people than it is for others. So it's one of those things of when people talk about retirement, one of the questions I got the other day was like, why would you even retire from life? And I'm like, what does retire from life mean? Like, I'm still breathing. I'm still doing yoga. I'm still eating snacks every afternoon. Why do you equate work with life so much that the idea of retiring from work means retiring from life in your mind? And how did you type that out and think that made sense, right? You type that out and you press send because retiring from work means retiring from life, right? Like that's just ugly. It's kind of ugly, and I'm not blaming anyone individually. We've been brainwashed into thinking that like what we do, what we produce, what we create is our highest value, and it's not. Like you're valuable just by being. And I have this message, and I mean, Black women, I'm here for you all day long. This is my message to you, and for everybody else who wants to hear it too. But like you are valuable just by being on this planet, no matter what you do, no matter who you are, no matter what your past says, right? You are valuable, and I value you. You don't have to prove it. You don't have to do anything to be of value. You don't have to create anything. You don't have to get a job. You don't have to get another certificate. You're of value, and you deserve a life of ease simply because you were put on this planet, right? Like I am a firm believer that I was not put on this planet to work. I don't know about y'all. I do not believe that like all the things that had to go right. I'm gonna call it right. All the things that had to line up perfectly and go right for me to be born, so I can make rich people richer. That does not make sense. I do not.
It kind of what you're saying. Are you familiar with the NAP ministry?
Yes.
So
Yes.
what she talks about, and I'm still digging into her content, but I love it. It talks just about how much our ancestors worked and how much they didn't have the luxury of rest, and how like it's our time. And I can say that I agree with you. If you hear that, that's construction happening in my background, but we're gonna have to work through this, guys. But I completely understand and I hear you. But it's also met with this idea, like my immediate like pushback when I catch the person inside of me talking and pushing back on what you just said is, but it takes effort. It takes work to get to where we got to. Like we have the luxury now of saying we want to rest because we are women who have established themselves, who have the nest egg already, who went to school, who got the education, and we toiled and we did do a lot to get that, which for me is true, and I think for you is true. How do we tell someone who's younger or who's starting out like that they don't have to do all the work we did when the work we did put us financially to benefit in this way?
Right. So I'm not saying that it's not work. I'm saying that we might not need to do as much work as we think. Like I said, my friend traveled the world for a year on $14,000 and came back to like $6 in her bank account. Right? Like there was no nest egg. She had $14,000 and she spent it all on the road, all of it, all gone. But she came back renewed. She came back, worked a job again, and then left again, right? Because she knew that a lifetime of labor wasn't for her anymore. So she was going to work to make money to take these breaks, right? I think we all have to make the choice of what is of most importance to us, and we have to walk boldly towards that. So if living in another country is of most importance to you, for whatever reason you would choose that, then how do you make that happen? What are the bold steps you can take towards it? And that's going to look different for everybody. But is it going to look like laboring for 20 years? No, right? Like it could, but it doesn't need to. And so the amount of labor required is going to depend on what you decide is the highest priority for you. If getting a newer McMansion every 3 years and a brand new car every 2 years is of highest priority to you, I'm not knocking it, but that sounds like a lifetime of labor to me, right? And so what are the things you can do? Can you build a business that does not require 40 hours of work, a week from you? Can you maybe work part-time at a salary that allows you to work, 1, 2, 3 days a week, and that's it? Whatever things that you can do to meet your dream that allows you to step out of working backbreaking work or mentally exhausting work every day until you're 65. Because really that is the thing that I'm saying you don't have to do, right? You don't have to work every day until you're 65 like these people have told you. So how do you back out from that? What are the other options available to you? And they're going to look different from everyone, right? Maybe that's a year off every 3 years. Maybe it's working remotely from wherever you want. Maybe it's 3 weeks off between every new job, and you get new jobs frequently because that can bump up your salary. Whatever that choice is, how do you not fall into the I have to work every day at a job I hate until I'm 65 because that's what I was told, right? Like that's what I want us to free ourselves from.
And it's like what you're saying, just to add some more clarity, is that we talked before about you're working to make someone else rich, and that's what most people are doing. But when I mentioned that we worked hard to get to where we are and to give ourselves that stability, we were also, maybe we had to play that game and work in that corporate environment to make someone else rich, but at the same time, we were investing in ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like that's the difference. Like the people who are just working to get by and are unhappy and not pouring into themselves in some way, whether that's your education, your mental health, fitness, whatever that looks like for you, but putting yourself, like you're getting something out of this too. Like yes. You're not going to be chewed up and spit out dry by the time you're done in corporate America or in any situation. Like, it's a tango. You unfortunately have to do it for now. You're doing what has to be done, but you are building yourself up in the meantime to do something else.
And so the other trick part of that is, and I mentioned it with houses and cars, what we're told is that getting things is the answer. Getting things. But things, you just got to work harder for things, right? Things, you got to buy a new house with a bigger closet because you've done 20 unboxings of your fancy purses online, right? Like the things are nice. And I am, I say I'm a maximalist. Like I am not a minimalist. I am a person who loves things, but they're not my highest priority in life. Living a peaceful life. I have a business. I do not talk to anybody I don't want to talk to. Nobody. That is my internal claim to fame. That is the thing I'm proudest of myself. After working for a decade with people I didn't like, now, if I don't want to talk to you, we don't talk. Well, no. Like that is at the core of my business because that was my priority. Like I want to build a business that's easy, that I am not hustling. I am not a sleep when you're dead person. I am not a hustle around the clock person. I am a snacks and naps in the afternoon person. And so how do I do that, right? Like how do I have that life? How do I build that? And it means less things than I might have had early in my legal career, right? Like it means less things than I might have had early, but it's more happiness and it's more contentment because I've chosen to always be walking towards my priority. I know what my priorities are with my money, and I want to live a life that allows me to put them first and to put myself first.
Yeah, boundaries. You said you were good at boundaries before, and I will attest to this, everyone listening and watching, because I know that we reached out to you late, like last year, to come on the show, and I think my assistant, she came back and she was just like, oh, like she's not doing any more interviews right now. She's like, check in Q1, and I was like, okay, I actually love when people do that because I'm just like, it shows me more how I should respond to people when I don't want to do things, or I'm just taking a break. And I just want to mention that as a prime example of we're still talking, you're still going to be on the show, and it wasn't about feeling like you were missing an opportunity, which I feel like so many of us feel like if we're asked to do something or put in a position, we have to say yes, even though our soul and like our body is saying no, and we need rest or we want to do something else. And it's just a testament to our conversation that you said, not today, check in next year, and to me that's so strong. And you walking the talk of what you're saying about boundaries and really doing what you want to do.
Yeah, it's hard. So the reason I did that was because I took all of December off. I made the decision that I was not working in December. And so no matter what, a couple things came my way and I was like, we'll talk about it in the new year because I'm not even going to try to schedule something in December for the next year. Nope. Like I'm not checking email, I'm not doing anything. I know this. And that for me plays into the life I want, right? Like I have created this life of ease after a life of labor, right? Like I put in my time and now I have a much easier life. But like you said, it required money, but how much money it requires for you is going to be different. Like I said in the very beginning, I was looking at the chicks who worked in a coffee shop and were taking 6 months off, like, how y'all pay for this? And then I realized that's not my business. How can I pay for it was my business. The only thing I need to worry about is what do I want and how can I pay for it? How can I make it work? And so I would say for everyone else out there, like, if you hear someone doing something, to your point, Mila, earlier, of like, oh, well, they have this big chunk of money. Yes, but like, what can you do? What do you like about what they're doing? What can you emulate? And what can you do with the amount of money you have now? Like, look for the possibilities instead of saying, I don't have their resources, right? Like, because I have been in the I don't have their resources days, and I know what that's like, but it's not helpful. It's not productive. It does not move you forward. What moves you forward is saying, okay, let me see how much, let me check my budget. Let me see how much money it would really take to live in Thailand for 6 months. And then let me see what I can do, right? Instead of saying, well, I don't have the money they have, so that can never happen for me.
It's the biggest strength, and I think reason for what it looks like your success and even mine. If I could say that because I just wrote down the what is important to see, like the what exposes you to what's possible. And the how, yes, it's cool to learn the how from someone. That's kind of like what we're talking about here. What I hope this inspires someone to do is say, wow, the what is, look at what Roshida did. And the how, like I'm learning a little bit. And even if you don't relate to the how, you create your own how. You take what you need, you leave what you don't, but you create your own how. You piece together the inspiration that you're seeing, and you see that it's actually possible for someone to do this. Let's see how you can make it possible for yourself to do this. Love it. Okay, Rashida, last question before we get going. In terms of what your life looks like now, so even though, would you consider yourself financially independent, or like you don't have to work ever again, or do you kind of feel like you're in that almost there stage? And then what are you doing for work and money while you're in Mexico City?
I don't have to work anymore. I've started saying it recently, so I'll say it here. I have last December I would have had over $1 million invested. Now it's less. I'm trying to be more transparent and talking about money. It's not the most money in the world, right? But I don't I don't need more money. I don't need more than that now. And to your point earlier, it will compound. It will get bigger. I will have more money. Come on, stock market, do your thing, right? But I do work, but the work I do, they are passion projects. So when I started traveling the world, women started reaching out to me and saying like, I want to quit my job and travel too. Like, how you do that? Or like, I am planning a 6-month trip, but these are my worries. How can I get around this? And so what started out of that are 2 businesses. One in which I is a solo business. I run it myself. I help women move abroad and take career breaks. So I do one-on-one coaching. I have a course. And then another one, I started a summit with my very good friend, Stephanie Perry. We do an annual summit called Exodus Summit, and that is for Black women who want to move abroad or take career breaks. We have a Facebook group as well. We give you the information you need and the inspiration. Because a lot of times, like, you said earlier, like, I can't speak to mothers who are moving with children, but I know women who can. And so we bring them on and say, like, this is how we did it. I can't speak to women who had low paying jobs who did it. You know what I mean? Like, and so I know in a lot of ways, everyone's life is going to seem familiar to someone and just like unrecognizable to other people. And so we grab a variety of women, we put us all together and we say, like, who can you draw inspiration from? You're not going to draw inspiration from everybody, but like, who can you draw inspiration from? Like, let's talk about this. So we've done, Summit's been running for 2 years. The first year was really very educational. We talked about different countries and different places to go. And the second year, we had women who attended the summit the first year and then moved abroad, right? Or took a career break in the year after attending the summit. And we had them come back and speak to their experience about traveling, about moving abroad, about like giving it all up and starting over. And it was kind of amazing. So, two passion projects. I do them because I love them. I also have the boundaries that make sure that I don't do more work than I want to. I don't talk to anyone I don't want to. I value my peace. And as long as these businesses support my peace, I will support the businesses. When they don't, I'll just dig into those non retirement investment accounts and take some money out and be somewhere else for a few months,
I
right?
love
Like,
it. Oh my gosh. I love this. I know for sure there's going to be a lot of people loving you and wanting to hear more from you. So, where can they find you?
okay, you can find me at my new website. It is RoshidaDowe.com. That's ROSHIDADOWE.com. I also have a lead mag. I have a guide, a sabbatical planning guide that helps people, gives you 10 steps if you want to plan a sabbatical or a career break. You can grab that. Jamila, will you be able to link that?
Yes, I'll link that in the show notes. So whatever, Rashida, you'll send it to me, and then if you're listening to this, you can find the show notes where just click more, click the arrow description, go to the website when the episode comes out, and I'll link Rashida's her all her information so you can follow up.
Yes.
Yes.
My sabbatical planning guide for anyone who wants to do that. And yeah, so this is what it's truly like my joy in life is to see women who are like, I didn't think this was possible, but now me and my kids and my husband every once in a while are we've moved abroad or we're traveling around the world, and it's amazing because I'll tell you that one last point I want to make. Most people, when I talk to them, are scared about what the return looks like. That's the biggest fear. Will I get the job? What will life be like? Will it be hard? All these things. But then they never end up returning, right? Like the biggest fear, that was the biggest fear for me too. Like, if I take a year off, will I still be taken seriously in my industry? And then like 6 months into the time off, I was like, I'm never working for not one of y'all again. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I did not know what I was gonna do for money, but I knew it was not going back to the same industry, to the same type of employment. It was not gonna happen. And then I realized I couldn't work for anybody. I can't work. I have been broken. I cannot work for anybody.
Same.
Right? Like, and that's what happens to most people is when they take this, when you get 6 months off, a year off of working, you're like, going back to work, clocking in? No.
Yeah, being on someone else's time like frame and having to be somewhere like that. I choose where I show up and where I want to be. Oh my gosh, Rashida, this has been amazing. Thank you.
Yay. Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye.